Today, my guest is David McGowan. David McGowan is, in the last couple of years, has been researching and putting out information on his Center for an Informed America website about Laurel Canyon. Laurel Canyon is something we touched on the other day, and we talked quite a bit about it, actually, and we kind of went through, some of David's information and, then my own information about having lived in the area and remembering some of the days long ago. Dave also is the author of 3 books, the latest, Program to Kill, Understanding the F Word, and Derailing Democracy. These are also available on his site, the Center for an Informed America, and we have a link up on our site. But before I get into that any further, we've got him right here. Let's go ahead and go to very special guest, David McGowan. Thank you for joining us.
Well, thank you for having me. Pleasure to be here.
Yeah, it's, the information just, when I encountered it, it was so kind of over the top for me, having, like you, lived there, having been through the canyon, having been through Laurel Canyon, having been a part of the kind of the culture, having known about this, having experienced the darkness of it and the deaths all over the place. And then you've been grappling with it, making all these connections in your research, which is excellent. And I mean, just, you've let the research speak for itself. But how did you get, I know you're also a native Angelino, or at least Southern Californian. How did you get interested in Laurel Canyon?
It actually was kind of happened by accident. I am a native Angelino, born and raised. Lived in the greater LA area for almost 50 years now. About the first 30 in the South Bay, and then the last 20 up in the San Fernando Valley. And lived around and driven through Laurel Canyon for all of my life, pretty much, and never really gave it a second thought. And how it actually came about was a couple of years ago. My wife and I were getting ready to go on vacation, and my oldest daughter gave me a book, Laurel Canyon, written by Michael Walker, I believe it is, who wrote this, what was really kind of the first account of this whole scene that was going on there in Laurel Canyon. And of course, it was a very mainstream account, certainly not the conspiracist point of view. But anyway, she got me this book, and it was supposed to just be light reading, about the emergence of the rock and roll scene and the Sunset Strip scene and the hippies and whatnot. And it was supposed to be a break, from all the insanity, just some light reading to, lounge on the beach on vacation and read. And instead, as I was going through reading it, there were just alarm bells going off all over the place on all these little tantalizing little bits and pieces that he threw in there but left unexplored, basically. And the more I read this book, the more I realized that there was a big story there beyond the one that he was telling. And by the time I got home from vacation, I was just trying to find everything I could find, every book, magazine article, newspaper article, web post, everything and everything I could find on that scene to sort of flesh out the details that had been hinted at, just barely hinted at. I mean, most people would read this book and think nothing of it, but, that's not the way my mind works. And for me, there was just alarm bells going off everywhere as I read this, and so for the next 2 years, I researched everything I could find on the subject. I spent a lot of time physically up there, just kind of getting a feel for the place, and and visiting some of these sort of historical places like the old Houdini Mansion, the former site of the log cabin, the site where the Wonderland murders occurred, various places like that. And the more I looked at it, the more amazed I was at this huge story that was lurking there that had gone like completely, and I was kind of offended, actually, in a way, that, you know, I mean, I've been immersed in this stuff for quite a while. I consider myself to be, you know, pretty knowledgeable about these types of things, and it was almost kind of an insult, kind of offensive to me to think that this huge story had unfolded literally right in my backyard, and I and nobody else really had ever really looked into it and knew really anything about it. This whole sort of backstory to what to the story that's been told in the mainstream press. That's basically where it came from.
And I think the big story here is not just the tie-ins, but first of all, what hits you right off the bat is the amount of death. I mean, you know, on top of all the fantastic stuff of, you know, the birth of the hippie generation, all the music that came out of there, the birth of FM radio came about that time too. All that was happening, and yet the deaths. And now you mentioned here, you know, just we go through some, you know, the obviously the one we've covered here lately from a few different angles is, you know, the Sharon Tate situation, and LaBianca murders Manson. You actually tie Manson in a lot more into the music scene and into people knowing him and into the Canyon than anybody else ever did. I'm not even sure anyone else really tied him to the Canyon so much.
Oh yeah, he was definitely he was definitely known to hang out at Mama Cass's house in Laurel Canyon with her entourage, which was right across the street from a home that was being rented at the time by Abigail Folger, the coffee heiress, and her boyfriend Wojtek Frykowski, who were two of the victims of that. So yeah, there were a lot of ties. The murders, those murders actually occurred in Benedict Canyon, which is a few canyons over.
Right.
But actually, the Laurel Canyon story is sort of bookended, and that was one of the things that Walker did point out in his book, was that whole scene was sort of bookended by two of the most notorious, grisly, bloody mass murders in LA's history. The first of which was the Manson killings, which both the alleged perpetrators, and I'm still not convinced that the Manson family actually did that, by the way, but that's a whole other story.
Okay,
I think there were other actors probably involved, but anyway, that kind of came at near the beginning of the heyday of Laurel Canyon, and what were known as the Wonderland or the Four on the Floor murders, which was when some guys went into a home occupied by a gang of drug dealers and just literally beat them to a pulp with lead pipes. And it actually, there's been two movies based on that. One, Wonderland, starring Val Kilmer, which is actually a pretty good one. That's a fairly accurate retelling of the crime, which involved John Holmes, the porn star, and there's this real sordid tale. And also, Boogie Nights actually is sort of a fictionalized, contains a fictionalized version of those murders. But so those, those two big, huge, high-profile, bloody mass murders. The first one was 5 victims. The second one was 4. Those were both directly connected to Laurel Canyon, and in between those, there was just an astounding array of deaths of people either killed in the canyon or people living in or deeply connected to the canyon killed elsewhere. Just a stunning array of both names that people would know, like, the old silent film star Ramon Navarro and actress Inga Stevens and a few others who were killed in their homes in the canyon, and just various other.
Well,
just a withering array of
yeah.
death.
You've got Mineo, but Linkletter, wasn't Linkletter called a suicide? Linkletter's daughter.
Yeah, Diane Linkletter. Yeah, hers was right at the mouth of Laurel Canyon. She allegedly committed suicide either accidentally or intentionally when she was out of her mind on LSD, supposedly. Of course, there's a whole other story to that, in that she wasn't alone when it happened, and the guy that she happened to be with was later the only witness to another celebrity death. And there was another death in the Linkletter family also, right in close proximity to Diane's death, like a brother-in-law or something who supposedly shot himself in the head. So there was a whole, as always, there was a whole other story to that as well. But yeah, that one was a Laurel Canyon death. Sal Minio's death was at the mouth of Laurel Canyon. Inga Stevens and Ramon Navarro both killed in their homes in Laurel Canyon. Just a lot of them. Just a staggering array of, and also, you know, like wives and girlfriends seem to have.
That's an amazing.
Seem to have gotten whacked quite a bit. I think for one of Crosby's and Jackson Brown's wife.
And then Jackson Brown. Here we have another one tying into the Old Money, L.A., which is really not old. It's kind of like Old Money transplanted to L.A. in the 20s and 30s, and the rise of this, what I might call the L.A. Mafia. And you know, interestingly enough, Linkletter himself was tied more to the establishment, and then that establishment, as you pointed out, also goes to military intelligence. So, you know,
that's another thing. There's just.
And another
one thing that just really amazed me was how many of these people, these Hollywood personalities, both in the music field and in the acting field, the so-called Young Turks, Peter Fonda, Dennis Hopper, and Bruce Dern, and Sharon Tate, actually, and Jane Fonda, and all of them who traveled in the same circles as the Laurel Canyon musicians, and some of them even lived in Laurel Canyon. In fact, some of them even tried to be musicians themselves. Peter Fonda released a folk album back in those days when he was living in the canyon, hanging out with all these people. But what amazed me was that virtually all of them, all of the big names, I mean, you'd be hard-pressed to find one who isn't, are sons and daughters of the military intelligence establishment. I mean, just right down the line, it just, I was amazed and at how little digging it actually took to find that out, and just, you know, going through all of these people, you know, the heads of, you know, the figureheads of all of the big Laurel Canyon bands, Frank Zappa and the Mothers of Invention, John Phillips with the Mamas and the Papas, Jim Morrison with the Doors, David Crosby with the Byrds, Stephen Stills with Buffalo Springfield, and on and on and on. Every one of these guys, right down the line, is a product of the military intelligence establishment.
Which is the establishment.
At some point, you know, at first, you know, people are, you know, a few names, well, that's just a coincidence. Well, you know, maybe it's, at some point, it's like, how many coincidences does it take to make a conspiracy, you know? And it's at some point, I passed that threshold a long time ago with this story, because I find it very hard to believe that the only people in the country that had musical talent and were actively promoted in those days just coincidentally happened to be, you know, sons and daughters of the military intelligence community. And if you look at them, damn near every one of them, Jackson Brown, who we already mentioned, Emmylou Harris, just on and on and on. Every one of these.
And yet the public just accepts them like they're just coming from all over the United States, just, you know, poor boy made good type of thing, and just stumbled into stardom out there, you know, with my guitar. And
it's just like they just all came flocking in from all across the country, and even from Canada and elsewhere to L.A.
Well, Canada
in this time frame of the mid-'60s. despite the fact that LA was not really known as a music mecca back then. There was not a lot of recording facilities and performing venues and whatnot, and LA wasn't really that much on the map.
Yeah, you had the Troubadour, you had the Whiskey, and I'm just trying. You had the bigger venues like there was always the LA Forum, and I guess beginning in the '70s. You had. I'm just trying to think of some. You didn't have anything like the blues. The blues clubs or anything like that. It was just most people would play. I'd say at the Troubadour or the Whiskey. The Whiskey wasn't like in those days breaking open new band. They were really having established groups there, not for new acts. Like now, I think it became at one time a pay to play place.
Yeah.
But then you'd have name acts, and of course all the Sunset Strip. I mean, you also have done the kind of iconography of the Sunset Strip where you had all these establishments and all these places along the strip. I mean, then you had the Playboy Club. Maybe it's still there. You had Ben Frank's, which is one of the hangouts, I suppose.
It was a huge. Yeah, that was sort of an after party hangout.
Yeah. Till late. Then there was. Tower Records was also going in at that time, became a big kind of hub. But even before that in the 60s, before Tower Records went in, you had, a few head shops along the way. I guess that was along where the Pandora's Box was, became like a empty lot. I don't even know what it is now. You would know. But I mean, back in those days.
It's actually a traffic island. It's in the middle of, it's where it used to be is now in the middle of a main street. It's like a little traffic island.
It's
Pandora's Box used to be.
And so it wasn't really much though. I mean, like you wouldn't look at the Sunset Strip like you would today. It's all because in the 80s it really went through this big time money transformation. But in those days,
not at all. I mean, Nashville was and is the center for country music, and I'm drawing a blank here. The center for Motown was sort of that was the epicenter of the soul music scene, and pop music was pretty much New York back then. So there was no real compelling reason that somebody, I want to be a rock star. I think I'm going to go to L.A., But yet they all came pouring in and all at the same time, and they all congregated in Laurel Canyon for the most part. And they all, for the most part, all came from military intelligence families. And some of them, a lot of them actually, even knew each other previously. Like Jim Morrison had actually attended this kindergarten with Frank Zappa's wife, or the girl who would become Frank Zappa's wife. And then they end up, 20 years later, they end up neighbors in Laurel Canyon, and that's just entirely coincidental, just like everything is. So there's just...
Okay, so why do you think that? Was this a conscious movement on the part of, you think, people that wanted to start their own record companies, or what's behind it all? Why were these people chosen? And then I'm going to get into the deaths of the boyfriends and girlfriends and things a little bit later, but why, have you come to any conclusion as to why?
I believe basically what it boils down to is that the establishment knew that there was going to be growing opposition to the war in Vietnam, and they knew that there was going to be a very vocal and very aggressive resistance and sort of a countercultural movement, and so they sort of just preemptively got in there and created it themselves so that they'd be able to control it. This kind of the way I see it. They wanted to head off this anti-war movement that they knew was going to develop and limit the damage that it could do and control it as much as possible, I believe. And so the way to do that was through these rock stars being sort of promoted as countercultural icons to create this whole sort of 60s hippie, flower child, countercultural movement, which I do not believe was organic in any way. I used to believe that it was basically an organic movement that was later co-opted. But at this point, I think the whole thing was sort of concocted right from the start.
Mm-hmm. And looking at Jimi Hendrix's death, for example, just, I'm just going to dive in because you've got to see David McGowan's info on this. He's got many, many chapters all available from his site, which I guess we just call, well, let me give the link. It's davesweb.cnchost.com. That's davesweb.cnchost.com. Go there and you can read this information for yourself. And while you're at it, go ahead and check his books out there as well. I'm going to dive in here. It's all so much that I could talk to you for, a long time on a lot of this because, you've done an incredible job. A guy like you is just what was needed back then. You're doing it now, but boy, I wish I had come across personally on a personal level here. I wish I had come across this information back, about 1975, let's say.
I think it was a very well-crafted illusion, and
Yes.
I think a mistake that a lot of people make nowadays is equating the anti-war movement with the hippie flower child movement and viewing them as sort of one and the same. And I think that was the goal of the program, but that wasn't the way that it was originally. The anti-war movement was a separate, something quite separate, and the hippies just kind of came along sort of out of nowhere and co-opted it. And I think that was quite deliberate because they wanted to give the anti-war movement a face that would be completely unacceptable to mainstream America. And so what we got were these hippies that, everything about them was offensive to sort of, middle America. The hairstyles, the clothing styles, the open drug use, the music, everything about them was designed, I think, to repel mainstream America and prevent the anti-war movement from gaining any additional speed by putting this unattractive face on it, or a face that would be very unattractive to the majority of Americans at that time.
So you think
that's so? I think the whole hippie flower child thing with the music and everything that went with it was a creation of the intelligence community to take the steam out of the anti-war movement.
Okay.
And various other movements that were going on at the time, black empowerment, the women's rights movement, civil rights movement, all these different things that were kind of coming to a head in the 60s, which were legitimate movements, and all of that kind of got co-opted by the hippie flower child thing.
Okay, and then it grew. I guess it took on a life of its own. But, okay, the deaths. If you're in a military operation, then you would expect that, okay, in dealing with a military operation, there are going to be deaths. When you look at this from a military point of view, you can see, oh, okay, collateral damage. We had to kill so-and-so because they knew this. We had to kill so-and-so because they knew that. These high-end kids of these families, I can look at it from a spiritual perspective or just a conspiracy perspective, but the point is that, it's fascinating from a military perspective because a lot of these people knew too much. They understood. They had, danced with the devil, if you will. They sold out to the beast. You could put it in whatever terms you like, but they were owned in some way. And, perhaps that's why their lives were taken, to silence them or to silence others. Now, let's just take the case of this Eric Burdon connection of Eric Burdon and the Animals, obviously, great, big-time artist of the 60s. And the connection to Jimi Hendrix, the time that Jimmy's death. I'm just diving in on one thing. When Jimmy had his death, the first person called by his girlfriend, Monica Danneman, who was the last to see Hendrix alive, was Eric Burdon of the Animals. And he had relocated to L.A. to take over ringmaster duties, from Frank Zappa after Zappa had vacated the log cabin. Okay, just in that little part of a paragraph, there's an implication, and my mind just starts reeling about this. Okay, who is Eric Burden then to Hendricks, and is there a military connection there? And I know there is, but I just want to hear what you have to say about that. I mean, was Burden somehow a senior officer in this, or was Burden calling in the execution of? Was Jimmy executed? What are your?
I believe that he was. Yeah, I don't believe that his death was accidental. I can't really recall offhand what the Eric Burden connection was. Actually, I think didn't they share a manager or something who used to boast of CIA connections or something.
Right. You've got that.
And then he died not long after in some kind of a curious plane crash.
Mm-hmm.
I can't really recall all the details.
Okay.
There's so much. I mean, there's so much material in this series. I think I'm up to like chapter 18 or something like that. I'm not even sure. And some of it I can't.
I would love to just follow Burden and see the connection to Hendricks around and see a movie about that, because I mean, right there you've got all these players connected. It's almost like wherever you go, wherever you jump into the information, it connects to everybody else in some way.
Yeah, everything is connected to everything. It's a very hard story to tell in sort of that was one of the problems I had with even trying to tell the story, because you can't really tell it in any kind of a linear fashion, because everything's connected to everything else, and it just weaves in and out, and you start off in one direction, then you go off on a tangent and another tangent, and eventually you circle back to where you started, and so it's a very twisted and convoluted tale with a lot of connections between a lot of these people on many different levels. And one of the questions that I get a lot is if these people were whacked, does that mean that they were the good guys? I mean, were they the good people that were getting silenced? And I don't know that that's necessarily the case, because a lot of the people that ended up dead had the same military intelligence connections as the people that made it through. And I believe that to the people at the top of the food chain, they consider these people expendable, whether they're insiders or not. If they become, as long as they're doing what they're supposed to be doing, then, that's all well and good. But if they at some point become a liability, I don't think that the people at the top have any qualms whatsoever about eliminating them, whether they're insiders or not.
Right. It just seems like it's automatic. I mean, if you follow the Burden thing a little further, you have the manager, Michael Jeffrey, and then, he's siphoning off money from Hendricks, and after Hendricks' death, and he's managing Burden as well, so I guess that's the connection. And then, he's tied to organized crime, which most big families are, also working for the CIA, and then his plane goes down. And then the girl, the girlfriend, or and this is just too amazing, it cannot be coincidental. The girlfriend also dives out of a window and kills herself, who would have information from Jimi Hendrix, underage prostitute named Devon Wilson, who had been with Jimmy the day before his death, plunged out of an 8th-floor window in New York's Chelsea Hotel.
She, her and the manager and his girlfriend or common-law wife or something. Didn't she turn up dead also?
Right. So any kind of witness to anything Hendrix would have said about whatever was going on, if they hadn't, that's the way it looks to me. Any connection, they just want to make sure they snuff it out so that there is no trail. If there a lot of these deaths just reek of cleanup operations, damage control, and there's frequently other deaths, so
connected to it.
And this is
like you say, it's.
But then just following.
Yeah, they got to plug the leak, and they'll take out anyone and as many as they deem necessary, in order to do that. That's the way I see it anyway, from my seat.
Well, for all the people that I've talked to about, and the things I know about military intelligence, psyops, and all those kind of things, and the kind of, hit squads that are out there. Yeah, all that is certainly possible. But it's just hard I think, for people to get their mind around this idea that this whole thing that really spurred on a cultural movement of music, that most people got hooked on all these albums and all the, and there was also a connection to radio. B. Mitchell Reed, the DJ, I don't know if you remember him he came out with, that was the first real FM station, and he had something with Joni Mitchell, but it was really the birth of FM, if you will. And all of that while all that is going on, it's just mind-boggling to think that the whole thing is tainted by, the whole thing is, all of it, and all these artists and all the household names are that tainted. And then I suppose the ones who are left alive, who obviously know something, they're having to be just, I guess, every day of their lives, hope that someone doesn't sneak up behind them and put two in the head, right? I mean...
Probably so, to some extent, yeah. I mean, it was a scary place in and around Laurel Canyon. I mean, people were getting bumped off like all the time. It was uncanny.
That's
and of course most of them were written off as suicides or overdoses or accidents or whatever. But if you really look at them and start scratching beneath the surface, they don't really look like accidents or suicides. So I would imagine there's still people to this day that kind of look over their shoulder every now and then.
Yeah, it's amazing. I mean, whether you take Keith Moon or whether you take, Cass Elliot, you take all these different people. I mean, the whole list of people. And I guess this conspiracy just went to the wayside, sort of like the Kennedy conspiracy or any of the other ones. It never really got resolved. But I think you've done enough here to show that obviously it's way beyond coincidence, and that the entire music industry, and indeed it points to the entire entertainment industry as being owned and operated.
Yeah, absolutely. And and also, I mean, the fact that there were so many government operations that were known to be going on right there in the same little canyon, the Lookout Mountain Laboratory, which was this top secret, covert, supposedly a film lab, a film production facility, but God knows what all else they were doing there, right in the heart of Laurel Canyon. And then there was a male prostitution ring that, according to the guys that worked there, when they were interviewed by the LAPD, they named top political and law enforcement, government officials as being among their clientele. Very similar to cowboy cases that have popped up in Washington D.C. every now and then, and various other things. So you have this one little isolated neighborhood of Los Angeles where all of these rock stars and young actors and actresses all decided to congregate, and they all just happened to be the sons and daughters of the military intelligence community, and they all just happened to be clustered around these covert military intelligence facilities. And, I mean, I don't know how anybody could look at that situation and come to the conclusion that that's all just some big coincidence. I mean, there's just too many. There's just too many things coming together. Too many threads woven through this story for it to all be just,
Everyone is connected to everyone else. Everything then leads to, the military-industrial complex. All that leads to even more nefarious stories out there about Operation Paperclip and, the use of LSD, mind control, psyops, and then ultimately traumatizing and psyoping the American public, like you said, away from the war, but then other things,
Oh, absolutely, yeah. I mean, my most recent book was, it covers, a lot of very controversial subjects: mind control, Satanism, organized pedophilia, ritual abuse, all this kind of stuff.
It's all connected. And let's go into
that. In my book, it's sort of woven through the stories of these what we know as serial killers, which I don't believe the public opinion, the mass opinion of what a serial killer is accurate at all, and that's sort of the subject of my last book. Mm-hmm. But what fascinated me was that all of those very same threads, the occultism, the pedophilia, the mind control, all of the military intelligence connections, all of this stuff that wove through that book, also the very same threads are woven through this Laurel Canyon story over and over and over. And everything is connected. It's not like I'm more and more of the opinion that it's not just a whole bunch of little disconnected conspiracies that have gone on and continue to go on. It's all pretty much one.
It's one
conspiracy with a lot of tentacles, and
it's one conspiracy.
All roads point in the same direction.
Right. You take
in the final analysis.
Sure. You take the pedophilia angle. You take the Satanism angle. Satanism, of course, is mind control. So, basically, satanic initiation involves mind control, multiple personalities. Kids are indoctrinated.
Yeah.
Kids are indoctrinated.
Pedophilia too. It's all about trauma. It's all about conditioning the kids for it's all the same thing.
All right.
Exactly. It's the Satanism, the pedophilia, the mind control. They all run together.
Could it be then? What it all points to is there a human group sitting there in a little boardroom somewhere organizing all this, or is this a lot of this being organized from a spiritual perspective, where they're caught up and just like programmed to do what they do, and they're all just in an interconnected way doing what they do when you're part of that world? But it's horrifying to see who. Okay, let's call it a game. The Game. There's a movie called The Game with Michael Douglas and Sean Penn, which I think is kind of looks like this. If you recall
I remember that. I remember when it came out. I don't recall if I ever saw it or not.
Well, I would recommend it to you, and I think it would blow your mind after the research you've done to see something actually in film where someone tries to describe it.
Really?
The opposite end of this thing is that, okay, if they want to recruit you and you don't want to join, good luck on being alive if they want to pursue it. There's that angle. The other angle is a lot of these people were indoctrinated as children. They've come into it as, children. They're sort of owned and operated. That's how they put their people into these positions because they're programmed to do it. Also, sometimes mind control programming can bring out incredible talents in people, especially trauma-based mind control.
Absolutely. Yeah. That's another question that people they say, well, are you saying that these people don't have talent, that they were just put into this position because of their connections and began to promote this agenda?
Or nurture?
No, obviously. Jimi Hendrix was just, to this day, this is the music that I grew up on.
Yeah, I
know that these people, a lot of these, Frank Zappa was an incredible musician. Jimi Hendrix, a lot of these people were. And, but, my question is, were they groomed for that practically from the day that they were born? Is that why they were such virtuoso musicians? And I think it probably is. I think it's very much a self-perpetuating system,
and
with that begins with the abuse of children. And then they grow up to become abusers themselves. And most of these people who are the quote-unquote controllers, they're victims themselves, they're all being manipulated by hidden puppet masters, and the puppet masters are themselves the victims of higher up puppet masters.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
So I think it's very much a self-perpetuating system.
So if you don't feel so bad if you didn't become that rock star, because basically, and then we go to more modern examples, like for example, we have Kurt Cobain, an extremely talented, singer-songwriter that was just coming into his potential. We also see, this idea of Satanism, and let me just draw the connection, and please don't he's not signing on to what I'm saying. What I'm saying is what he's saying is what he says. But if I make a spiritual connection between, say, the death of Kurt Cobain and the rise suddenly of semi-talented Courtney Love, I just, from all of a sudden nowhere to going into these movies and all that. After his death, you do see, the girlfriend dies, and all of a sudden the other artist, the one left behind, goes up. Have you noticed?
Yeah, I don't. Courtney Love. Well, I don't know what is going on with that. I mean, I want to know, where she came from, what her connections are, because I find it just astounding that she managed to get close to, like, so many of the guys who would emerge as the sort of stars of the, I don't know if it was the 80s or 90s music scene, I mean, Kurt Cobain, with Nirvana, Scott Weiland with the Stone Temple Pilots, right. Trent Reznor with Nine Inch Nails, Evan Dando.
There's a whole other story there.
I mean, just how did this one girl manage to get so close to every one of these guys who just happened to, and if I don't know if you've seen the documentary film
I did.
On the death of, I think it's called Kurt and
Courtney. It's straightforward documentary, and I'm sorry if I don't.
Broomfield with
right.
where they interview the guy who was in like some death metal band or something, who said that Courtney Love approached him about whacking Kurt, and then during the making of the film, that guy himself got hit by a train or something.
Yeah. See, but that's what I'm talking about. In other words, it seems like all this that you wrote about Laurel Canyon is perpetuating into we see it all the way into the 90s now, and it's kind of diffuse. Let me ask you a question about the canyon itself and talk a little bit about the geography. Do you feel there's any sinister element in Laurel Canyon today, or is it just a thing of history?
I don't, I get a really weird vibe when I go up there now, and I've spent quite a bit of time up there, as I said. I went and photographed a lot of these houses and stuff, and I get a really weird vibe from it now. But I don't know if that's just me, because I got all of this stuff floating around in my head now, Because before, I've driven through the canyons all of my adult life. I work a lot of times over on the west side, and the quickest way there, and my wife does also, and the quickest way there from here is straight through the canyons, either Laurel or Coldwater Canyon. Yeah. So I've been driving through them all of my adult life and never gave it a second thought, and never seemed, I actually thought how much I'd like to live there. I mean, because it's compared to the rest of LA, it's just this, beautiful, very serene, bucolic, you got these just rugged landscape and natural vegetation and wildlife, and I mean, it's very far removed from the LA basin.
Right.
Not distance-wise, but I mean, it's a whole other world up there.
Yeah,
I always really liked it up there, and now I get a really dark vibe when I go through there, and I don't know if that's just me or.
I enjoyed.
It definitely has a bad vibe to me now.
Yeah, there was a bad vibe throughout. I mean, you realize that. Let's give the audience just a little bit of a breakdown here. Mulholland Drive kind of connects. It sort of bisects the valley and the west side, and you have canyons. It's like up on a mountain, so you have canyons through there. So you've got Laurel Canyon, and as David mentioned, Coldwater Canyon. You've got Beverly Glen, and then, eventually, you've got Malibu Canyon, Topanga Canyon, these various canyons that go through. And all of these have attracted, you also mentioned Malibu quite a lot, the Malibu connection here to Laurel Canyon. We also have the Mulholland connection, not far from, of course, what's been in the news recently is the Roman Polanski affair, which, of course, that seems light in comparison to all this. But, I mean, that's the kind of milieu, the pedophilia, satanic milieu. And, of course, you can't deny these strange connections, at least in a spiritual way. No concrete connection between Manson and Polanski. But you have, Jack Nicholson's house being involved in this.
It happened at Nicholson's house, which is right off Laurel Canyon on Mulholland, right next door to former Brando estate where all kinds of weirdness happened.
Yeah, so
and death, and which Nicholson now owns. He actually owns both estates now.
and you've got
So yeah, that happened right. That happened right there also during that same time frame. Yeah, I mean it was a lot of bad stuff happened in that canyon between say 1965 and 1980.
I think I understand what it all is. I mean, I can just say this, that it's a microcosm of the world, in a sense, a very heightened, hyper, huge money. It's almost like a point in a universe where everything coalesces, like an axis point, for the entertainment industry and also for politics, for the big money. It just happened at a point in history, which you pointed out, to all coalesce at Laurel Canyon, and this deception, possibly the hippie movement being a way to make money, number one. The game goes on, all the deaths, number two, but ultimately a way to deflect, people from being against the war. Of course, it had the opposite effect, didn't it? I mean, it caused people to really criticize the war all the more.
To some extent, yeah. I mean, but the battle cry of the hippie movement, as voiced by good old Timothy Leary, was turn on, tune in, drop out. I mean, they were basically, telling people just don't worry about it, just get high and. So I think that a lot of the messages that were promoted within the hippie flower child movement were very counterproductive as far as actually making a difference and stopping the war. And a lot of people tend to romanticize that era and want to believe that the countercultural movement, the hippie movement, did stop the war, but it didn't. I mean, it drug on and on and on, and it didn't. We didn't pull out of it till when, 1975,
4 or 5. Yeah, it's we did pull out of it eventually, but I mean, we're in perpetual war now, and no matter what the administration is in, the wars continue, and it's getting more and more surreal for me personally. And now the Laurel Canyon thing coming back almost to tell me something about my youth, because the personal interest I have is that I was amongst them. I was there, and I was kind of what you might call a crack up in that whole thing. And then when I look at this, it's like, well, I feel like I should have been killed too for knowing that it was all about pedophilia, Satanism, and and all that. I basically told them to F off, and the result was pretty well ruining my life. But
yeah, you're not as well known these days as Crosby or Stills or.
now Crosby, I think I saw him here. I wish I had a thing to get license plates, because I saw a guy exactly looked just like him here in Santa Fe, New Mexico, driving right down Cerrillos Road, the middle of that's kind of like the Ventura Boulevard of Santa Fe. Anyway. And so, and it says Spiritus, and there, and it looked exactly like him in an SL Mercedes. And I just thought, and then I thought of your connection between another past resident here, Melissa Etheridge, and of course the idea that they used his sperm to make their baby, her and her partner, conceived, I believe, in New Mexico, but I don't know if she lives here anymore. But I mean, there are all these kind of New Mexico connections, and then of course, what's in New Mexico? The military-industrial complex. So
there you go.
You can't
like all roads lead there.
And then who's here? Val Kilmer. There's rumors of him running for governor. And what else is here? The Hollywood.
Are you kidding me? Really?
He may wind up being the next governor of New Mexico. Yeah, and you heard it here first.
Wow, I had no idea. I actually admire some of his work. The guy's a hell of an actor. I have no idea what his background is. It's probably not good, but
nobody played.
That,
he was better than Jim Morrison. I mean, he played such a good Jim Morrison that he topped Jim Morrison.
He was incredible. Yeah, he was also incredible as John Holmes in Wonderland.
Everything he does.
You know, I believe that you know, and it goes back to the mind control stuff. That I believe that the reason that the best of Hollywood, of the Hollywood crowd, the reason that they are so good and that they can almost literally become these characters, and you hear stories all the time about actors being so deep into character that they can't leave it aside when they leave the set and whatnot. And I believe that the reason that they are so good at that is because they're drawing on their mind control programming.
Yeah.
They have all of these alter personalities
they're multiples
that they can draw upon to fill these different roles. If they have to play this certain character, then they have
they
an
dissociate.
alter identity that they can bring out that fits that role. And I believe that that's why Hollywood is just a nest of mind control, in my opinion.
Yeah, I've also
virtually all of these people, I think.
Yeah, I've also
and that, I believe, is the reason that they, and they talk about method acting and getting in character and it's all just euphemisms, basically, for tapping into the programming that they've had.
It is amazing, but in my way of looking at it all, it's really no different than it is today. I mean, and you've also gone on to write about America. Corporate politics, fascism, and mind control on a larger scale. And to me, it just seems like, well, these are just more and more levels of it. And they just, anyone that wants to fight it, they just laugh at you and they just like, what are you trying to do? You're fighting the whole world here. This is all connected. It's almost like the 3 Days of the Condor. The guy goes, well, I'm going to print this. He goes, well, how do you know they're going to run it? I'm going to shout to the world about all this. Well, who's going to listen to you?
Yeah, I mean, mind control is pretty much everywhere. It's all about trauma, and it's most effective with kids, but it's effective to some degree with everyone. And that's my like I said, my most recent book, which isn't really that recent, but on serial killers. And I think mind control operates on several levels there. Most of these people themselves show clear evidence of being mind control victims, and their crimes to some degree are attempts to control the public by traumatizing the public at large with these heinous crimes.
Well, just like you have in your book, Programmed to Kill: The Politics of Serial Murder. I mean, obviously there's all kinds of there's the surface story about these serial killers, and then I'm thinking that what you're doing is just linking it all into a much bigger picture. I haven't read the book yet, but I really want to read it looking at the blurb here, And the other one, Fascism and the Politics of Illusion, that's amazing. Understanding the F word. These just look like the most timely books for today you can imagine. Derailing Democracy, The America the Media Does Not Want You to See, by David McGowan. And I would think that these would be... Well, there will be a day, David, I'm pretty sure, where these will be more widely read. As society breaks down further, I think a lot of people are just in denial. They don't really, really want to know all this stuff. They don't want to know that they're heroes and they're actors and they're musicians, the music they grew up on, that the whole thing has been Alice in Wonderland. They don't want they don't want you to ruin that for them.
Oh, I know. I mean, yeah, and I struggle with that myself. Like I said, these are, I was actually a child of the '70s, but the music of the '70s pretty much sucked. So the bands of the '60s were very much, that was very much the soundtrack to my youth, and I had a huge admiration for a lot of these people, and it's very hard to let that go. That's one of the hardest things about pursuing these kind of lines of research is watching so many of your former heroes fall by the wayside.
Yeah, well, all heroes have feet of clay. Now, everyone should know that by now. I mean, we're all flawed, folks. I mean, but David McGowan, definitely his voice, he really deserves to get out there. I think Laurel Canyon, what it is, to me, it's like, I talked about at the last show I was on, it was it's almost like an ant farm microcosm that we can look at to see how things work. You know, to see the interplay of commerce and art and the arts and you know, and these odd murders. Do you think, and this is my last question because I know we're right out of time, so do you think that most of the murders were because they knew something, or do you think some of them were just because they wanted someone to murder, I mean, or they wanted them out of the way? I mean, is there any central theme on the deaths?
I think it's probably a combination of those factors. I think some of them had probably become liabilities. Maybe they knew too much, or they had, you know, decided that they, you know, realized that they were working for the dark side, or, you know, whatever, and they had to be disposed of. And probably others maybe just for the sensationalism and the trauma that it inflicts on the American people. You know, I mean, I believe, kind of unrelated, but I believe that was one of the main motivations for taking out Kennedy, was that, and I kind of thought that they might be pursuing the same program actually with Obama, and that the American people at large were sort of openly encouraged to really sort of idolize this guy, Kennedy, and consider him almost like a member of the family. So, I mean, his death was just hugely traumatic to the American people. And I actually thought that they were setting up Obama to do the same thing.
It makes you mad. Yeah. It makes you mad. It makes me mad personally, just because but you kind of put the last, your research is so overwhelmingly good that there is no doubt in my mind as to any of the things that I thought, any of the things I was persecuted for feeling or thinking, and told it was wrong thinking. You know, I mean, all the brainwashing that I went through personally because of the fact that I knew something and they tried to brainwash that out of me. It was all true. But it was a lot worse than I thought after reading your research, when I just see the not Dave's opinion here. It's David McGowan's information, just the list of things. And then when we get to Linkletter, well, there's some personal things with that I can share with you later, but not really yet for public consumption. It's just, you know, in a way, you don't know this, but you've helped me, you know, put this thing into perspective and be grateful that I escaped LA in one piece. My guest today has been David McGowan. Please stay right there, and I just want to have a word with you after, okay?
Okay.
That'd be okay with you? Just a minute. Okay, David McGowan, my guest. I thank you for being with us. This is Zeph Daniel, the Zeph Report.